The coastal wind carried the familiar scent of salt and pine as I turned onto the driveway of my Malibu beach house, expecting the quiet sanctuary I had spent years saving for. The sun glinted off the waves beyond the terrace, but what should have been a calm morning was shattered the moment I laid eyes on the scene. Cars I didn't recognize were scattered across the driveway. Music blared from the house, and children ran recklessly through my garden, kicking balls into the flower beds I had tended with such care. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my stomach twisting. My furniture was displaced, wicker chairs draped with towels and clothes, and the vibrant red geraniums I had nurtured for years were trampled beneath small feet. Every corner of this house represented late nights, extra shifts, and months of careful saving. This wasn't just a home. It was the embodiment of my independence, the result of my determination to build something that belonged solely to me. I stepped out of the car, keys in hand, trying to steady my racing heart. That's when I saw her, Lillian, standing on the terrace with an air of ownership that made my chest tighten. Her family surrounded her, grinning with the arrogance of entitlement. A chill ran down my spine as I realized I was no longer entering my sanctuary. I was stepping into a hostile occupation. Memories of signing the mortgage, painting the walls, and planting each flower came flooding back. I had fought for this, scrimped and saved for it, and now it was treated as if it belonged to anyone but me. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to take a deep breath, holding on to the calm I knew I needed. I lifted my keys and walked toward the front door, each step weighted with disbelief and resolve, knowing that what awaited inside would demand every ounce of patience and strength I had. The confrontation began the moment I crossed the threshold. What is this parasite doing here? We have no space for you. Lillian's voice cut through the music and laughter like a knife. My stomach lurched as I froze on the doorstep, the words echoing in my head. I could feel every eye on me, the smirks and whispers of her family slicing into my confidence. Her teenage cousins snickered from the terrace, and her mother leaned against the railing with a look of smug superiority, sizing me up as though I were nothing more than an intruder. One of Lillian's children darted past, almost knocking over the wicker chairs, while another held a ball aloft, challenging me with a playful yet defiant grin. Their presence, so casual and unashamed, made it clear that they had claimed my home as their own. I swallowed hard, my hands tightening around the keys I still held. Shock and humiliation churned inside me, a storm of disbelief and rising anger. How could someone I called my sister treat me like this? How could she parade her family through a house I had earned, with every dollar and every hour of sweat and sacrifice I had poured into it? I wanted to speak, to demand they leave, but the words stuck in my throat. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to leave quietly. And yet another part of me, smaller but fiercer, refused to yield. This house, my sanctuary, could not be surrendered so easily. I took a slow step forward, then another, forcing myself to breathe and focus. The confrontation had begun, and I would not retreat, no matter the faces glaring back at me. I squared my shoulders and met Lillian's gaze, ready to assert what was mine. The battle for my home was about to unfold. I stopped in front of my home office, the room I had always kept locked and organized, my sanctuary of paperwork and important documents. My fingers trembled as I opened a drawer that should have been untouched. Inside, I found a stack of folders I didn't recognize, labeled with my name but filled with papers that weren't mine. At first, I thought it was a mistake, an accidental misplacement, until I saw the legal documents applications attempting to transfer the house into Lillian's name, citing me as incapable of managing valuable property. My stomach dropped. I read through the notes carefully. There were letters, unsigned medical statements, and even emails between Lillian and someone claiming to be a legal advisor. They outlined a plan to present me as incompetent, to make it appear legitimate that the property should be transferred. The timeline had been carefully prepared. This was not a spur-of-the-moment intrusion. Someone had plotted this, and my sister was at the center of it. I sank into the chair, heart pounding, a mix of fear and rage surging through me. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreach. It was a calculated betrayal, a deliberate attempt to steal from me. Every late night I had worked, every penny I had saved, every moment I spent building this house was being undermined by someone I trusted. A flood of questions raced through my mind. How could Lillian manipulate the law against her own sister? How could she recruit others to her cause? Fabricating documents, exploiting loopholes, and assuming I wouldn't notice until it was too late. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to yell, to demand justice on the spot, but another part recognized the danger of acting impulsively. I forced myself to take a deep breath and think clearly. I couldn't let anger blind me. I needed a plan, evidence, and legal counsel. I had to protect not just the house, but the integrity of everything I had built with my own hands. As I gathered the folders and placed them into my bag, I felt a sense of resolve hardening inside me. This betrayal would not go unanswered. The next step had to be precise, calculated, and decisive. I locked the office door behind me and moved toward the phone to make the call that would begin my counterattack. I sat at the kitchen table, the folders spread around me, and took a deep breath. My first priority was securing my finances. I called the bank, verified account balances, and requested immediate freezes on any access by third parties. Every penny I had saved over the years needed to be untouchable. The thought that Lillian or anyone else could manipulate my resources sent a shiver down my spine. But I forced myself to stay calm and focused. Once my accounts were secured, I made the call I had been dreading but knew was necessary. Thomas Grant, a family law attorney with a reputation for handling property disputes, answered professionally and listened without interruption as I explained the situation. I could feel my voice tighten at times, but I forced it steady. He assured me he could take action, but emphasized the importance of clear, organized evidence. I spent the next hours meticulously cataloging everything: property deeds, receipts, photos of damaged furniture, and lists of missing personal items. I included screenshots of emails and text messages, anything that demonstrated premeditation. Every piece of evidence added weight to my case, transforming my frustration into a structured plan. As I worked, my thoughts drifted to Lillian. She was my sister, the person I had once trusted above all others, and now she had betrayed me with deliberate intent. Part of me wanted to scream, to confront her immediately, to let her see the full measure of my anger and disappointment, but I knew that acting impulsively could jeopardize everything. Justice requires strategy, patience, and control. By the time I leaned back in my chair, the sun had begun its descent over the ocean, painting the room with long shadows. I felt a mix of determination and lingering sorrow, knowing that the road ahead would test every ounce of my resolve. I gathered the evidence, packed the folders, and prepared to meet Thomas Grant in his office the following afternoon. Tomorrow, the counterattack will begin. The morning air was crisp as I stepped out of the taxi, the folders of evidence clutched firmly in my hands. Thomas Grant arrived moments later, his expression calm but resolute, accompanied by a uniformed police officer and a notary. I followed him toward the house, each step steady, every muscle alert. Today was the day the invasion would end. From the terrace, I saw Lillian and her family laughing, unaware that the law was about to intervene. Their faces froze as they spotted the official plates on the police cruiser, the sharp click of the notary's briefcase, and Thomas walking with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how to dismantle their plan. The shock on Lillian's face was instantaneous. her triumphant expression faltering as reality struck. Thomas handed her the eviction papers, and the officer began to read them aloud, detailing the violations: illegal occupation, property damage, theft of personal items, and falsification of documents. Lillian's hands trembled, and she stumbled over her words. Her earlier arrogance replaced with panic. The children clung to her, confused, as the seriousness of the situation settled over the group. I watched silently, my heartbeat steady, my mind clear. Every move, every detail had been anticipated. Their smug confidence, the casual way they had treated my home as theirs, had blinded them to the consequences of their actions. Each page of the documents I had prepared, each photograph of the damage, each receipt proving ownership and care, reinforced the strength of my position. Veronica tried to argue, her voice high and sharp, insisting the house belonged to the family. But Thomas countered calmly, citing the evidence, the law, and the notarized documents. Lillian's mother looked helpless, and the children's confusion mirrored the collapse of the illusion that they had been entitled to my property. I stepped onto the terrace as the family scrambled, collecting their belongings under supervision, and felt a strange sense of quiet satisfaction. The house, my home, was finally being returned to me. Lillian's expressions of shock and fear confirmed what I already knew: they had underestimated me at every turn. As the last of the boxes were loaded into the cars, I took a deep breath and prepared to survey the aftermath, knowing the next step would be restoring the home I had built. The house was finally empty, the echoes of chaos fading into silence. I walked through each room, taking in the damage with a critical eye. The cushions were stained, the rugs needed deep cleaning, and some furniture had been scratched or displaced beyond repair. I began organizing a professional cleaning service, scheduling them to scrub every surface, wash the fabrics, and restore the house as close as possible to its original condition. As they worked, I moved methodically through the rooms, cataloging missing or damaged items. Some belongings were irretrievable, like the fragile porcelain plates I had collected over years, but photographs, documents, and small mementos had been recovered. The process was tedious and exhausting, yet I felt a growing sense of control. Each item restored, each corner cleaned, was a tangible reclaiming of my space and my life. The emotional scars, however, were harder to erase. I remembered Lillian's words, the smirks of her family, and the way I had felt small and powerless. Anger and hurt still simmered beneath the surface, but I could feel a shift, an emerging sense of empowerment. This house had been violated, but it had not defeated me. I had survived the humiliation, and now I had the tools to assert myself and protect what was mine. I paused in the living room, looking at the sunlight filtering through the windows, imagining the house as it once had been: orderly, peaceful, and entirely my own. This restoration was not only physical but symbolic, a reclaiming of dignity and agency. With the cleaning underway and repairs scheduled, I turned my thoughts toward the next steps. There was more to be done, not just to recover the home, but to ensure that I would never face such betrayal unprepared again. The next phase required careful planning and vigilance as I set about securing the house for the future. With the house returning to order, I turned my attention to the younger members of the family, the nieces and nephews who had been caught in the middle of Lillian's scheme. They were innocent, unaware of the deeper motives behind the chaos that had unfolded in my home. I invited them over individually, spending time teaching them about boundaries, respect, and the importance of valuing other people's property. At first, they were hesitant, their eyes wide with confusion, unsure of how to navigate the tension between their mother and me. I approached them gently, sharing stories of my own mistakes and lessons learned, encouraging them to ask questions and express their feelings. Slowly, walls came down, replaced by small moments of trust and understanding. Even as I nurtured these connections, I maintained a cautious distance from those who had caused harm. Lillian and her older children were off limits, at least for now. I could not allow their previous actions to undermine the lessons I wanted to instill or the safety of my home. My focus was on the young ones, helping them recognize right from wrong without letting the betrayal of adults define their perception of family. We spent afternoons in the garden, planting flowers and tending vegetables together. Each activity a quiet reminder of the care and effort that make a space and relationships flourish. The house began to feel alive again, not just as a structure, but as a place where guidance and connection could grow. Watching the children laugh, asking questions, and genuinely listening, I felt a cautious optimism. Bonds could be rebuilt, slowly, carefully, without erasing the lessons of the past. I knew that some wounds from the family betrayal would never fully heal. But moments like this offered proof that trust and understanding could grow anew in the spaces where respect and accountability were nurtured. As the sun dipped low over the terrace, I realized the work of protecting both my home and these fragile connections was far from over, and the next steps would require planning and vigilance. With the house restored and the younger family members slowly reconnecting, I took a step back to reflect on the past weeks. The legal battle, the confrontation, and the painstaking process of reclaiming my home had left their marks. But they had also revealed a strength I hadn't fully recognized in myself. I had fought for my autonomy, defended my property, and emerged with both justice and dignity intact. The lessons were clear vigilance, preparation, and knowing your own worth are crucial when others attempt to overstep boundaries. I realized that empowerment isn't just about asserting authority in the moment. It's about creating systems that protect you and those who rely on you. I began implementing measures to ensure my home could never be so easily violated again, updating locks, installing security cameras, and formalizing legal protections to prevent any future disputes. Each step reinforced a sense of control and stability that had been absent during the invasion. Beyond my personal space, I felt a responsibility to share what I had learned. I started speaking with young adults and peers, offering guidance on protecting their assets and recognizing early signs of exploitation. Sharing my story became a way to transform my anger and pain into purpose. Conversations about boundaries, respect, and legal preparedness helped others navigate situations I had only just endured, and in doing so, I discovered a renewed sense of meaning and connection, even as I reinforced my independence and advocated for others. I knew that life would continue to test me in subtle ways, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet confidence that I could meet those challenges on my terms. I moved through the house, checking that every room, every lock, and every security system was in place, aware that the next chapter of my life would be defined not by betrayal, but by the careful, deliberate choices I made to protect my future. The house had regained its quiet rhythm, each room restored to the order I had worked so hard to maintain. I moved through the spaces slowly, touching the polished surfaces, checking that every lock was secure, and noting the presence of the new security cameras. This home was more than walls and furniture. It was a testament to my perseverance, my independence, and the years I had devoted to building something that belonged entirely to me. The memories of the intrusion, though still sharp, had begun to fade, replaced by a steady sense of control and accomplishment. I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the shock of betrayal, the humiliation, and the anger had been overwhelming at first. But each step I had taken documenting damages, securing finances, and taking legal action had strengthened my resolve. I had learned that asserting boundaries is not only necessary but vital, and that standing firm in the face of family betrayal requires both courage and strategy. Even as I claimed victory, I approached the relationships around me with care. I continued mentoring my nieces and nephews, teaching them about respect, responsibility, and the value of integrity. With Lillian and the family members who had caused harm, I maintained a careful distance, protecting both my emotional well-being and the lessons I wanted to impart. Each encounter was deliberate, a balance between openness and caution, ensuring that past mistakes would not repeat themselves. Sitting on the terrace as the sun sank into the Pacific, I felt a quiet pride. The house, the life I had built, and the dignity I had defended were mine to protect and cherish. It stood as a symbol of resilience, a physical reminder of what can be achieved through determination and courage. The experience had changed me, deepening my understanding of strength, autonomy, and the meaning of justice. I knew now that life would continue to bring challenges, but I was ready, confident in my ability to face them with clarity and resolve. As the last light faded over the water, I looked out at the horizon and breathed in the salt-tinged air, feeling at peace in the home that I had fought to preserve and would continue to safeguard for the years to come. The house smelled like cinnamon and butter and something older like memory if memory had a scent. I had been in the kitchen since just after sunrise, chopping onions with cold hands and peeling apples one by one. The turkey was in the oven by 10. By noon, the stuffing was cooling on the counter and the apple pie was resting on the windowsill, the way Grandma used to do back when the house still felt full. It was Christmas Day, and I was trying again to make it feel like it used to. My name's Claire. I'm 28, a UX designer at a studio in Seattle called Blue Fern, but I've been back in Tacoma for 3 years now. Moved home when my mom was about to lose the house. It was supposed to be temporary. Funny how temporary turns into invisible when you're living with someone who forgets you pay the bills. Mom Deborah is in her 60s. She hasn't worked since the hardware store laid her off in 2019, and she hasn't said thank you since around then either. Still, I cooked. I cleaned. I decorated the table with the old red napkins and the chipped ceramic reindeer we always put out even though one antler is broken. I wanted it to feel like Christmas. Not because I believed in miracles anymore, but because I believed in trying. My sister Lacey arrived an hour late with wet hair and no apology. She's 24, still lives here too, kind of. Comes and goes. Mom appeared around 4 dressed in her gray sweater with the pearl buttons phone in hand, scrolling through someone else's life. No one said much while we ate. The only sound was the fork scraping her plate and the occasional clink of ice against glass. I poured the wine. I offered second helpings. I lit the candles. I kept waiting for the moment where something would feel warm, like family. And then, just as she was slicing into the turkey hand still on the knife, my mother looked up and said, "Claire, you need to move out." She said it like she was commenting on the weather. Like it wasn't Christmas, like I hadn't just basted her bird and vacuumed the rugs and paid her mortgage again this month. I didn't answer right away. I think I blinked. Twice. Lacey glanced at me, her fork pausing midair. And for a second, I thought maybe I'd misheard. But no. My mother didn't repeat herself. She didn't need to. She just looked down again, took another bite, and kept chewing. Like that was that. And maybe it was. But here's the part I still don't understand even now. Why say it then? Why say it that way? What had I done that made my presence less welcome than silence? I didn't say anything. Not then. Instead, I set my fork down slowly the way you do when something inside you stops moving, but you're not sure what yet. I looked at the table I had set the turkey I had roasted the pie cooling behind us. The quilted placemats my grandmother made. All of it felt suddenly out of place, like decorations for a party I was no longer invited to. Mom didn't look up again. She chewed. She reached for her wine. She tapped her thumb against her phone, lighting it up to check a message that couldn't have been more important than what she'd just done. Lacey cleared her throat. Quiet. She always hated being the middle. She started, then gave up and went back to cutting her food. I finally spoke, voice low but steady. "Really?" I said. "You need me to move out." She nodded, almost like she hadn't heard the edge in my voice. Then she shrugged and said, "It's time I had my space back." Her space. The house I saved. The home I paid for every month, every bill, every grocery run, every oil change and air filter and broken garbage disposal. the space she hadn't been able to keep when I moved back. 3 years ago, she'd been on the brink bills unopened on the kitchen table, water heater leaking power shut off twice. I came home thinking I could help, and I did. Quietly, fully. I never asked her to split the mortgage. Never asked her to thank me. Never even corrected her when she told neighbors she was helping me get back on my feet. But now, what she wanted the space back. Like I was a piece of clutter she'd been meaning to get rid of. I looked at her, then really looked. Her hair was shorter than usual, her lipstick too dark. Her eyes never met mine. It wasn't anger I felt, not yet. It was something colder, recognition. She wasn't saying this out of nowhere. She'd been thinking it, sitting with it, maybe even rehearsing it. And the fact that she chose now Christmas dinner when I had done everything I could to make the house feel warm again, that said more than I think she meant it to. She didn't care how it landed. She just wanted it said. So I nodded. I didn't protest, didn't cry, didn't ask when or why or how soon. I just folded my napkin, placed it on the plate, and stood up. Behind me, the candles flickered a little. No one reached out. No one followed. I walked to my room and shut the door, but I couldn't stop hearing it, her voice flat final. You need to move out, and the echo behind it louder than anything she'd said. You don't belong here. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time that night. Didn't pack, didn't cry, just sat. Hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for something, some knock on the door maybe. A voice asking if I was okay. Even just footsteps coming down the hall. But the only sound was the distant hum of the dishwasher and the faint clink of glass from the kitchen like someone poured another drink. I stared at the bookshelf across from me. 3 years of quiet labor, stacked up utility bills, cookbooks, a candle I bought for the guest bathroom and never lit. On the dresser, folded carefully, was the one thing I knew I'd take: the quilt. My grandmother made it the year I turned 15. It was a patchwork of old family fabrics, my dad's flannel shirt scraps from Mom's apron, even a square of Lacey's baby blanket. She said it was a keeper of warmth. I hadn't slept under it in months, too afraid it would start to smell like a house that had stopped feeling like home. I stood and started gathering what I needed, slowly. Not with panic, not with grief, just motion. A small duffel bag, my laptop, chargers, the quilt, a framed photo of my dad taken the last Christmas we had together. I left the rest. Clothes in drawers, shoes by the door, the mug I always used in the morning with the tiny chip on the rim. Left it all. I didn't know where I'd go yet, but I knew I couldn't stay. And that was the strangest part, how easy it felt to leave. Not because it didn't hurt, but because the weight of staying had finally become heavier than the weight of the unknown. I slept in jeans that night, on top of the covers, with my coat nearby and my bag zipped, just in case I changed my mind by morning. But I didn't. The next day, while the house was still quiet, Mom asleep, blinds drawn, I walked out the front door and down the icy steps. No note, no explanation, no performance. Just the quietest goodbye I could give. I caught a bus across town to Lena's place, my friend from work, the one with too many throw pillows and a cat named Oliver who hates everyone. She let me in without asking why. I sank into her couch quilt in my lap coat still on and stared at the ceiling like it might offer some clue for how I got here. Not physically, emotionally. How do you go from savior to stranger without anyone noticing? 3 days passed. No calls, no texts, no knock on the door. I kept my phone face down most of the time. Not because I didn't want to hear from her, but because I knew she wouldn't reach out. And that silence was heavier than I expected. Lena made space for me in her guest room, though I insisted the couch was fine. I wasn't planning to stay long, just long enough to breathe without apologizing for it. Then one morning, while I was pouring coffee into a chipped mug that said, "World's okayest human," my phone buzzed. A message. From Lacey. "You won't believe what Mom's been telling people." That was all it said. I called her immediately. She picked up on the first ring, whispering like she didn't want Mom to hear. "She's telling everyone you screamed at her," Lacey said. "That you had some kind of breakdown at dinner and stormed out slamming doors. She says you abandoned her on Christmas. I didn't speak. I just listened. She's already talked to Aunt Janice, Uncle Rob, a few cousins. They think she's heartbroken. Like you left her without warning after everything she's done for you. There was that line again. After everything she's done for you. As if keeping me alive 2 decades ago was a debt I was still meant to repay. Lacey sighed. Claire, I know what happened. I was there. I just thought you should know what's going around. Thanks, I said softly. Really? We hung up. I stood in Lena's kitchen for a long time, the mug going cold in my hands. It wasn't the lie that hurt most. It was how easily people believed it. By that evening, I'd been removed from the family group chat. A cousin unfriended me on Facebook. One of Mom's church friends posted something vague about kids these days having no loyalty. I considered doing nothing, staying silent, rising above. But silence was what she counted on. So I did something else. I sat down, opened my laptop, and wrote. Not a rant, not a revenge piece, just the truth. I moved back in 3 years ago to help my mom keep the house. I paid the bills, the mortgage, and did what I could to make things stable again. On Christmas, I made dinner. I set the table. I lit the candles. And after the turkey was served, she looked at me and told me it was time I moved out. I didn't yell. I didn't slam anything. I just left. Because it was clear I wasn't welcome anymore. I'm not posting this for pity. I'm posting this because the version of me she's sharing isn't real. I hit publish. Then I closed the laptop and walked away. Didn't check the comments. Didn't refresh the screen. Just sat by the window quilt in my lap watching the clouds roll in over the city. The truth was out there now. And whether anyone believed it? Well, that part I didn't control. But what happens when the lie is more convenient than the truth? I didn't check my phone that night. I made a cup of tea, sat on the floor with Oliver the cat curled against my leg, and let the quiet settle like dust in the corners of the room. There was a strange kind of peace in letting go of control. By morning, I woke to more notifications than I'd seen in months. Texts, missed calls, emails, a few messages from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. I almost didn't open any of them. But curiosity is a persistent thing. The first message I read was from Aunt Lisa. She'd always been the most reasonable of the extended bunch, the one who sent cards at odd times, and once brought me a necklace with a tiny compass on it just in case you need help finding your way. Her message said I had no idea. I'm so sorry for believing otherwise. Your post, it changed how I see everything. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Then came a DM from my cousin Caleb. We hadn't spoken in years, but he wrote, Honestly, we always wondered why your mom treated you the way she did. It just never made sense. It was validating. And somehow it hurt. Because if they saw it, if even part of them knew something was wrong, why hadn't anyone asked sooner? Why hadn't anyone reached out when I was still in that house paying those bills, setting that table alone? Not everyone responded. Some people stayed quiet. Others, I think, unfollowed me out of guilt or discomfort. A few left neutral face emojis under my post, like they weren't sure what to feel. And then there were the ones who doubled down. A message from Mom came in around noon. Not a call, just a wall of text. I can't believe you'd humiliate me like this. You twisted everything. You're always the victim, Claire. You always have been. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just control reasserting itself. I didn't reply. I didn't even screenshot it for proof. I just stared at her words until the screen dimmed, then flipped the phone face down again. That was the thing no one tells you about finally speaking the truth, even when people believe you the damage is already done. You don't get the old version of your life back. You don't get the family photo back on the hallway wall. You just learn to live without it, and slowly you start deciding what to hang in its place. It happened on a Thursday. Gray skylight drizzle, the kind of cold that settles into your sleeves no matter how tightly you wrap your coat. I had just come back from the grocery store bag of Lemon's coffee filters and a loaf of sourdough I didn't need but wanted. I was halfway up the stairs to Lena's apartment when I saw her, my mother, standing at the top landing holding a pie in a plastic bakery box, the kind with the crimped edges and barcode still stuck to the bottom. Apple, of course. She smiled like we were bumping into each other at the post office. "Hi, Claire," she said as if it had been days, not weeks. I didn't move, just stood still, rein in my hair bag in one hand, key in the other. She looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I was seeing her clearly for the first time. "I brought pie," she said, lifting it a little like that, explained everything. I walked the last few steps, unlocked the door, but didn't open it fully. Just stepped outside and stood in the hallway. She didn't ask to come in. Instead, she started talking. "I miss you," she said. "Things haven't been the same without you. Maybe we could have dinner sometime. Talk things through." I looked at her, then really looked. No tears, no apology. Just a mother trying to reset the board without acknowledging the last move. So I asked, simple as I could, "Are you here to apologize?" She blinked, then she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world, "I don't think I need to. I think we both made mistakes." That was her answer. Her version of peace. Her need to keep the story mutual, equal, safe. I nodded once. Not in agreement, but in understanding. "I wish you well," I said. Then I stepped back inside and closed the door. Didn't slam it, didn't raise my voice, just closed it. Because there was nothing else left to say. And more than that, I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Life didn't change overnight, but it shifted, little by little. I found a small studio apartment a few weeks after the door closed, just outside the city, tucked above a bookstore that always smelled like paper and peppermint. The space was old but clean. Wood floors, a crooked window that caught the afternoon sun, walls that didn't echo with someone else's disappointment. I bought a couch secondhand from a woman named Ruth who insisted on giving me a throw blanket just because. I set up a tiny table by the window, planted a pothos in an old ceramic bowl, and let it take its time finding the light. I drank my coffee slowly, without earbuds, without whispers through the wall, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain why I was tired or quiet, or not in the mood to talk. Silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. Lena helped me move in. Oliver the cat came by once, hissed at the baseboard, and left. That felt right, too. Then one afternoon, my phone buzzed. Lacey. She asked if I had time for coffee. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with chalkboard menus and mismatched chairs. She looked tired, older somehow. Not in years, but in weight. After some small talk, she finally said, "Things got worse after you left." I didn't ask for details. She gave them anyway. The mortgage was slipping behind. The power had been shut off once. Mom blamed the electric company, blamed the economy, blamed me. "She's spiraling," Lacey said. "But I guess you knew that." I nodded. Then she looked straight at me. "You did the right thing by leaving," she said. "You should have done it sooner." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that until I did. We sat in silence for a bit, shared a lemon bar, talked about nothing. Before we left, she added, "I'm thinking of leaving too. Just need to figure out how." I reached for her hand and gave it a quiet squeeze. "I can't pay your way," I said, "but I won't let you drown." And for the first time in a long time, we walked out of a place side by side. It's been a few months now. The pothos is still growing. The quilt stays folded at the foot of the bed, its corners soft from years of use. I haven't washed it since I left. I don't think I will. It still smells like something I can't name but want to keep. I see Lacey sometimes. We don't talk much about home, but we talk. She sends me photos of apartments she's thinking about. Tiny kitchens, brick walls. One had yellow curtains and a view of nothing but. She smiled when she showed it to me. That was enough. I started baking again. Not often, just when it feels right. Apple pie once. Not for anyone, just to see if I remembered how. It burned a little around the edges. Still tasted like something worth keeping. I haven't taken down the post. People stopped talking about it weeks ago. But I leave it up not for them, for me. because there's a difference between moving on and pretending it never happened. Mom hasn't reached out again. I don't expect her to. Sometimes I think about that pie she brought to my door, still in the box, still cold. I never opened it. Some things don't need to be tasted to be understood, and some goodbyes don't need to be loud to last. She didn't teach me how to stay. She taught me how to leave with grace,